Hello everyone, and welcome. I hope this story gives you a chance to relax and unwind after a busy day. If you enjoy stories like this, please support the channel with a like, a share, and a subscription. Your support truly means a lot to me, and it gives me the motivation to keep growing this channel and bringing you more entertaining and enjoyable stories. Thank you so much for being here, and now, let's begin the story. At Aster Vale, the Galaxy Council's diplomatic station above the neutral moon of Vera, Mirelle Soren waited in a chamber reserved for officials about to be judged in public. She had been summoned before sunrise, station time, for an emergency hearing, and even before anyone faced her directly, the shape of the attack was already clear. Someone in the council wanted Earth, accused in full view. Someone wanted an old orbital vault near Luna branded as a hidden weapon before the room had time to ask what it really was. Her formal title was Senior Treaty Archivist for Earth. That was the safe version. It was the title printed on schedules, stamped on access sheets, and repeated by staff who did not know what else to call her. It explained why she had a place in the Hall of Civic Inquiry. It did not explain why 3 separate security teams had tracked her movements since she docked, why the hearing record had been sealed before she arrived, or why the council's security block had demanded her physical attendance instead of a remote statement. A young station clerk stood near the door, trying not to look afraid. "Archivist Soren," he said, reading from his wrist display. "The chamber will open in 4 minutes. High Examiner Voren requests confirmation that you will answer under full disclosure protocol." "Under full disclosure for what claim?" Mirelle asked. The clerk swallowed. "For the allegation that Earth is concealing a prohibited strategic asset in orbital custody." He spoke the last phrase carefully, as if the words themselves might trigger something. Mirelle looked past him through the glass wall, out toward the starfield and the pale curve of Vera. None of it looked like the start of a political crisis. None of it looked like a morning that might alter the relationship between Earth and half the smaller civilizations in Council space. "How much of the chamber already has the accusation?" she asked. "Enough," said another voice. Jonas Vale stepped in from the corridor without waiting to be announced. He was Earth's senior mission counsel at Aster Vale, gray at the temples, tired around the eyes, and angrier than he liked to show in public. He handed Mirelle a slim tablet. They distributed a summary brief to every voting block 32 minutes ago. Not the evidence, just the accusation. Earth is alleged to have hidden a superweapon inside an old treaty vault in high orbit near Luna. The clerk took that as his moment to disappear. Mirelle scanned the tablet and saw the words were blunt by design. Unauthorized containment. Possible extinction-level technology. Legacy concealment. Treaty abuse. Material risk to interstellar balance. "They are not trying to prove this," she said. "They're trying to fix the first impression before anyone asks what the vault really is." Jonas nodded. "And before anyone remembers who signed the vault into existence." She set the tablet down. "Who is driving it?" "Voren is the visible blade. Security block jurisdiction. Emergency stabilization language. Demand for immediate access." Behind him, Sarek Dal is making the procedural case that no treaty can shield a threat to galactic safety. That made sense. Kale Voren was force made legal. Sarek Dal was legality made slippery. Between them, they could make almost anything look necessary. Jonas lowered his voice. "They want the room hearing one word and one word only. Weapon. It is not a weapon. I know. It also is not Earth's to surrender." Jonas watched her for a beat. "Say that carefully in there." The chamber is already prepared to hear defiance. Mirelle adjusted the dark collar of her diplomatic jacket. Its lines were simple and severe, made for someone who needed to look composed without looking ornamental. "My goal in there is not to sound cooperative," she said. "My goal is to stop them from turning a custody question into an extraction order. And if they already decided, then I make them decide in full view." The doors to the Hall of Civic Inquiry opened. The chamber was built for spectacle disguised as order. Tiered arcs of seating rose around a central floor, and transparent screens floated above the rails, ready to display evidence, votes, and procedural challenges. The central floor held only 3 standing positions. One for the petitioner, one for the responding party, one for the presiding examiner. At the center stood High Examiner Cale Voren, broad-shouldered, silver-marked along the jaw in the military style of his homeworld. He wore security block black with no decoration except the examiner's insignia at his throat. To his right sat Counselor Sarek Dow, wrapped in pale formal layers that softened nothing about him. His face was calm. His posture was elegant. His attention was so carefully mild that it became its own warning. "Let the record show," Voren said, "that the responding party is present. Morel Soren of Earth Mission, designated custodian representative for the contested orbital archive. Not archivist, not treaty officer, custodian representative." So they had done their homework. Morel inclined her head. "Present." Voren turned to the chamber. "This emergency hearing concerns credible intelligence that Earth has concealed within a restricted orbital vault a prohibited strategic asset protected under obsolete treaty cover. The Council must determine whether immediate seizure, inspection, and neutralization are warranted." He let the accusation settle into the room. Morel did not speak. She let him spend his momentum first. "Responding party," Voren said, "do you deny the existence of the vault?" "No." A murmur spread through the upper tiers. "Do you deny that Earth controls final access to the vault?" "I deny the wording," Morel said. "Earth holds custodial authority under a multi-signatory treaty framework. Final access is not personal property, and it is not sovereign discretion." That slowed the room more effectively than a denial would have. People expecting a frightened refusal had to adjust. Voren's eyes narrowed. "Then Earth does possess the means to open it, under conditions set by all signatories who created the framework." "Answer plainly." "I am answering plainly." Voren raised one hand. A display opened overhead, showing a rotating image of a small orbital structure against the curve of Earth and the gray line of Luna beyond. The vault was old, compact, heavily shielded, and built for endurance rather than beauty. 3 days ago, Voren said, Council scanning arrays recorded active defensive masking around this vault, including military-grade encryption, remote lockout response, and autonomous denial fields. These are not the features of a harmless archive. Morel looked up at the image. The vault looked smaller on screen than it felt in memory. "It was designed to survive war," she said. "Exactly." "No," she said, turning back to the chamber. "Exactly not. It was designed during war by governments and species that knew their testimony would be destroyed if they lost control of it." Sarek Dow leaned forward at last. "And what testimony would require the defensive profile of a siege bunker, Archivist Soren?" The downgrade was deliberate. She ignored it. Testimony that powerful states might prefer to erase. Another murmur moved through the room. Voren stepped in before the line could breathe. "The responding party admits possession of hidden material capable of destabilizing major governments." "I said nothing about capability," Morel replied. "You supplied that. The chamber can hear the implication without your help. The chamber can also hear the difference between dangerous information and a prohibited weapon, if you allow it." The air sharpened. The room now understood the first fight. Voren wanted the vault fixed in memory as a weapon. Morel wanted the chamber forced to admit it had not proved that at all. Voren turned toward the presiding circle. "We request immediate interim authority to dispatch a security block team to the vault and secure all contents pending inspection." Jonas rose from Earth's delegation tier. "Earth objects." The petition conflates suspected armament with treaty-protected evidence custody. Interim seizure would irreversibly violate active multi-party obligations. "Objection noted," Voren said. "Expected." Unpersuasive. Dow spoke in a softer tone. "Let us remain disciplined. No one here wishes to dishonor lawful agreements. But no agreement, however old, can stand above common survival. If there is even a credible possibility that Earth concealed an unlawful strategic asset, the Council has a duty to verify before risk expands." There it was. The reasonable knife. Morel met his gaze. "Then verify the allegation honestly. Do not rename a vault so you can strip it before the truth inside has standing." "A truth," Dow said. "Or leverage?" He had chosen his angle well. If the chamber could be persuaded that Earth had retained the vault as insurance against political pressure, everything noble about it became suspect. Morel answered without hurrying. If Earth wanted leverage, we would have used it years ago, when the contents mattered most to the people who feared them. That was the first moment the room truly quieted. Dal did not blink. An interesting statement. One that suggests your government has long understood the material's coercive potential. My government understood the cost of breaking a promise. A counselor from the Western Arc signaled for recognition. What? Promise. Before Morel could answer, Vorin cut in. The chamber need not entertain rhetorical diversion. We are here to determine whether Earth has concealed a threat. Morel turned just enough to face both the counselor and the chamber. The vault was established after the border sacrifice campaigns, when several smaller civilizations accused larger powers of spending their worlds as buffers and bargaining counters. Earth agreed to serve as final custodian for original records that those smaller signatories believed would otherwise disappear. There were no raised voices after that, only a deeper stillness. Everyone in the chamber knew the border sacrifice campaigns by another name. Officially, they were stabilization actions. Unofficially, they were the wars that taught small systems not to expect honesty from empires. Vorin's expression hardened. And yet you admit those records were kept in secret. Protected, Morel said. Not secret. Known to signatories. Shielded from unilateral seizure. There's a difference. Dal spread one hand in a gesture of almost gentle concern. Let us grant, for argument's sake, that the vault began as a lawful archive. Treaties age. Circumstances change. Security environments shift. Surely Earth cannot expect the Council to tolerate a sealed orbital structure storing unknown material under exclusive human access. Not unknown, Morel said. Contested and inaccessible to anyone not entitled to rewrite it. That brought a sharper stir from the smaller delegations. Vorin decided the hearing had moved too far from his footing. Enough. Responding party, state for the record whether you will comply with an immediate access order if the chamber authorizes one. The question had been waiting from the start. Morel drew one breath before answering. No unilateral order from the Council can compel lawful access without breaking the original compact among signatories. If the chamber authorizes such an order, it will be choosing to violate an active promise made to protected parties. It was not a shout. It did not need to be. Vorin said, then Earth places treaty pride above common safety. No, Earth places common safety where it belongs, not in rumor. In fact, a notification lit across Jonas's wristband. He looked down, then up at her with a face that tightened by degrees. He requested speaking status. Vorin almost refused, then accepted. Earth mission has just received confirmation, Jonas said, that a Council security block vessel has already departed staging dock and is moving toward the orbital vault. The chamber flared with noise. Vorin did not look surprised. That told Morel enough. He wanted the room to feel urgency, not to pause over how that urgency had been manufactured. She felt the hearing shift. A procedural contest had become a race. Under what authority? Jonas demanded. Interim protective containment, Vorin said. A reversible precaution. For a structure whose access you do not legally possess, Morel said. Dal folded his hands. Then perhaps the simplest path is cooperation. You can accompany the inspection team. Supervise the opening yourself. Preserve dignity. Avoid escalation. There was the second trap. If she refused, Earth became obstructive. If she agreed carelessly, the chamber would remember only that a human custodian opened a suspected superweapon under Council pressure. Morel understood, then, that this had not been built for a chamber vote alone. It had been built as a sequence. Accuse. Isolate. Rush. Extract. Reframe. She lifted her chin and addressed not Vorin or Dal, but the delegations beyond them. Let the record show that I do not consent to the characterization of the vault as a weapon, and I do not concede the Council's right to strip a multi-signatory archive under panic language. If I travel to that vault, I do so as custodian of a promise, not as an admitting party to your accusation. Somewhere high in the chamber, a smaller delegation light shifted from neutral to active attention. Vorin said, "Is that a yes?" "It is a notice," she replied. "And now you may write your question properly." For the first time, a few officials who had come ready to watch Earth bend found themselves watching the chamber blink. 3 hours later, station time had shifted from cold morning to the thin brightness of Astorvale's artificial noon. The hearing had not ended. It had simply moved into its more dangerous stage. Morel stood in a secure consultation room 2 levels below the chamber while Jonas pulled live updates from Earth Mission's relay office. The transit order did not take effect immediately because even Panic had docking sequences and jurisdiction disputes. That gave Morel 43 more minutes. And in those minutes, Jonas forced her to think beyond the hearing and into what the room would believe next. "If this breaks wide," he said, "Earth will be accused of moral staging. Some blocks will ask why we carried this burden for so long without pressing reform earlier." Morel looked at him. "You want me to answer that in chamber? I want you to answer for yourself before the chamber asks. The room will hear hesitation as guilt." She sat at last. The chair was too rigid, but it anchored her. Because reform proposed by major powers can always be recast as self-interest, she said. Because the signatories never wanted the archive used as a human instrument. They wanted it preserved until the day power forced the issue in public. Jonas nodded once. "Good. Keep going. Because if Earth had opened it early, before direct coercion, every injured bloc would have said we were weaponizing their dead to expand influence. They would have been right to fear that. The archive was never supposed to make us righteous. It was supposed to make you reliable," Jonas said. "Yes." He waited. "Because the compact was built from distrust in every direction," she said. Smaller worlds did not only distrust the Council. They distrusted Earth too. The difference was that Earth accepted a clause no other major government would touch. Jonas already knew which one. Custodial liability. She nodded. If the archive were breached, manipulated, destroyed, or quietly absorbed, Earth would take formal blame under the compact whether or not Earth caused it. In simple terms, the holder takes the blame if the promise fails. Jonas leaned over the table. "What?" "Because a promise only matters to smaller states if someone bigger agrees to lose something by keeping it," she said. "Otherwise, it is just sympathy." That sat between them for a moment. Jonas finally said, "If you get the chance, put that into the room." Not as a speech, as a blade. A second notification flashed across his display. He scanned it, swore quietly, and turned the screen toward her. A council media advisory had already gone out to approved channels. It described the vault as a suspected clandestine deterrent system under obsolete human treaty control. "They have started shaping external coverage," Jonas said. "Not just chamber opinion." Morel read the line again. "Deterrent system. Worse in some ways than superweapon. More technical, more repeatable, easier for cautious observers to pass along." "Then they're not only trying to win the hearing," she said. "They're trying to define the memory of the hearing before it ends." Jonas's mouth tightened, which means when you speak, you need phrases the public can hold on to. Not legal brilliance, not historical density, clear moral terms, promise, custody, witness, yes, and one more. She knew it before he said it. Choice, he finished. If you can make the chamber's act visible as a choice rather than an emergency reflex, Dow loses his favorite shelter. Morel looked down at the orbital track again. Somewhere beyond the station skin, a security block vessel was aligning toward the archive. Somewhere below, Earth turned on, unaware of how many old dead were about to enter the room again. "There is something else," Jonas said more quietly. "You should know what the Secretary's office sent from Earth." He handed her a second message. It was short and signed, and written in the stripped language senior governments used when they feared sentiment might weaken discipline. Custodial integrity remains priority. Do not trade compact legitimacy for short-term reputational relief. If forced, preserve signatory standing before national image. Morel read it twice, then set the message down. Jonas watched her expression. "No surprise." "Not really." Some people expected Earth to tell you to protect us first. We are protecting Earth first, she said. They finally remembered what that means. He gave a tired nod. Good. Because if this goes badly, there will be human voices too asking why we took the blow for worlds that cannot pay us back. Morel stood. Then let those voices ask. Humanity does not keep every promise because it is profitable. No, Jonas said. Just enough of them to remain itself. The marshal's call came moments later. Transit boarding. No more time. As they walked the corridor out of consultation, station staff stepped aside with that careful mix of curiosity and caution reserved for people who might soon become symbols. Morel ignored them and fixed her mind on the sequence that mattered. Get to the vault. Keep the chamber present. Deny Dal first control of the story. Make any coercion visible as a choice. Do not let the archive be recast as human leverage. Before the marshal led them out, Jonas caught her sleeve one last time. When this turns personal in there, remember what the room needs from you. Not anger, Morel said. Not mainly. Orientation. They must always know where they are, what is being decided, and what it costs. She nodded. And if they still choose badly, then make sure they know. They chose. When the transit doors opened and the security block officers turned toward her, she no longer felt like the respondent in their proceeding. She felt like the person carrying a message through a building that had already decided it did not want to hear it. In the transit staging room, Jonas pushed another set of procedural notes toward her. They have boxed the language. Voren is asking for a supervised voluntary opening under emergency witness protocol. Dal is preparing a fallback petition that says refusal itself establishes probable threat. So either I cooperate and legitimize the accusation, or I refuse and feed it. Yes. Morel leaned against the table. What about the signatories? We reached 3 direct contacts. 2 are in transit range only. 1 has requested observer standing in the chamber. Boo. Keishi Reach. Envoy Terev Knoll. That surprised her less than it once might have. The Keishi had long memories, especially where promises were concerned. Can he help? In a fair room? Yes. And in this room? Jonas's expression said enough. Morel looked down at the table display again. The vault's orbital track was a clean line around Earth's near-lunar corridor, far enough from ordinary traffic to be forgotten, close enough to remind anyone with access that the archive was never meant to vanish. She had memorized every provision governing that structure years ago. She knew what could open it. She also knew what happened if those provisions were broken. Not an explosion, not a weapon discharge. Something quieter and perhaps worse. The treaty's distress cascade was the compact's alarm. If it triggered, every surviving signatory would be notified that Earth had failed to preserve protected testimony under the agreed terms. Jonas saw the thought on her face. If you go there and they force the issue, can you stop the cascade? No. Can you delay it? For minutes. Maybe less if they push hard enough. He exhaled through his nose. Then we are not only defending Earth. We are defending every smaller government that signed on the assumption that if the major blocs ever panicked, Earth would take the public hit before handing them over. That was always the arrangement. Jonas looked at her with tired respect. You were not supposed to have to cash all of it at once. A soft tone sounded from the room console. Incoming witness request. The screen opened too. Envoy Terev Knoll. He appeared against the pale carved backdrop of the Keishi delegation suite, long-faced, dark-eyed, his posture taut with restraint. Custodian Soren, he said, I asked for secure contact before chamber reconvenes. You have it. Terev glanced off-screen once, then back. I can confirm the existence of the Preservation Compact. I can confirm Keishi Reach is a signatory. I can confirm Earth did not create the vault for its own advantage. Jonas said, will you state that in chamber? I will state the first 2 without hesitation. The third will be contested as opinion. Your opinion is allowed. My people do not survive on what is allowed, Terev said quietly. We survive on what cannot be twisted against us. Morel understood him. Small civilizations learn caution because candor was often repackaged by larger ones. What can you say safely? She asked. That the compact was demanded by the vulnerable, not offered by the powerful. That Earth accepted custodial burden others refused. That any forced opening outside the terms would be remembered by signatories as a breach, whatever name the Council gives it. Then say exactly that, Morell said. Tara held her gaze. There is one more matter. We received a secondary transmission from an internal Council source. Unverified, but plausible. Security is not the only arm moving on the vault. A legal seal package is being prepared to confiscate all contents immediately after inspection under destabilization law. Jonas cursed under his breath. Can you send the packet? Morell asked. It is already routing to your Council. The screen darkened. Jonas checked the incoming queue, skimmed the packet, and set his jaw. It is real enough. Dow wants the chamber to think inspection is the goal. It is not. Inspection is the bridge to permanent custody. Morell straightened. Then he has no intention of letting the contents stand as independent testimony. Which means if the vault opens, he will try to own the first explanation of whatever is inside. Morell looked again at the orbital track. Then, that is what I have to take away from him. Jonas frowned. Ow! By changing who gets notified the moment the seals begin to break. He understood a second later. The witness chain. She nodded. Not the distress cascade. The signatory authentication chain. If I trigger full witness routing under treaty protocol, every surviving signatory receives notice that the archive is being accessed, and the chamber cannot later pretend this was a closed technical review. Jonas considered it. That will widen the political blast radius. Yes, it will also look like escalation by Earth. It will look like transparency by the custodian, Morell said, and panic by anyone who objects. For the first time that day, he almost smiled. The room doors opened. A council marshal signaled that reconvening had begun. When they returned to the Hall of Civic Inquiry, the mood had changed. Not calmer, harder. The chamber now knew there was an actual vault, an actual compact, and an actual race underway. Delegates who had arrived for a clean accusation were being forced to confront a Messier question. Not whether Earth had hidden something. Earth plainly had. The question was what sort of thing only survived if hidden from power. Vorin resumed the floor at once. Given the responding party's admissions and the real-time security posture surrounding the orbital structure, the security block renews its request for supervised access. Delay increases risk. Jonas stood to object, but Dow lifted a hand. Before Council repeats himself, the chamber recognizes observer's statement from Keishi Reach. So Dow had decided the safer move was to let the smaller signatories speak within a controlled frame. Envoy Terov Knoll appeared on the chamber display. His voice was level. His diction was precise. Keishi Reach confirms the preservation compact exists. Keishi Reach confirms Earth serves in a designated custodial role under that compact. Keishi Reach further notes that the compact was demanded by signatories who believed wartime records concerning their survival would not remain secure under major power custody. There was no tremor in the chamber now. Just attention. Terov continued. Keishi Reach does not comment on the content of the archive today. Keishi Reach does state that forced access outside compact terms will be understood by many signatories as a breach of protected trust. Vorin said, a trust that may now shield an unlawful asset. Terov's face did not change. That suspicion does not cancel the trust. Dow spoke before the line could settle too favorably. Envoy Knoll, is Keishi Reach prepared to assert that the contents pose no security threat? No. Keishi Reach is prepared to assert that no major power should reserve the right to define a threat whenever a buried record becomes inconvenient. That caused visible reaction in several arcs. Vorin stepped forward. This hearing concerns present risk. Morell answered before Terov could be cut off. Then let the present risk be stated honestly. The chamber is not being asked to choose between safety and sentiment. It is being asked whether large powers may tear open protected testimony by branding it dangerous before they know what it says. Vorin looked at her. You still refuse to cooperate? I refuse your framing. Then frame it yourself. So she did. I will travel to the vault, Morell said, each word placed carefully. I will attend as active custodian. I will not concede that the Council has unilateral rights over the archive. I will record, on chamber record, that this movement occurs under protest and under threat of procedural coercion. And if access begins, I will invoke all surviving witness provisions available to signatories. That last line snapped heads up across the smaller delegations. Dal's calm thinned for the first time. You intend to widen disclosure during an unresolved security event. I intend to prevent private confiscation during one. Vorin said, You are making this harder than necessary. Morel met him evenly. No, I am making it visible. The presiding circle conferred in low channels. It did not take long. Emergency politics preferred movement over wisdom. The ruling came down. Supervised custodial transit authorized. Security block escort granted. Chamber review remained in session pending live updates from the vault approach. It was exactly enough authority to be dangerous. As the room broke into motion, Dal crossed toward the central floor under cover of procedural exchange. You could still simplify this, he said quietly, by surrendering control of the archive before the chamber understands it, by demonstrating that Earth knows the value of proportional trust. Morel almost laughed. You accuse us of concealing a superweapon and call that trust. I accuse you of mistaking moral memory for sovereign privilege. That is not your real fear. Dal's eyes rested on her with practiced patience. No, enlighten me. You do not care whether the chamber sees me as stubborn. You care whether it begins to ask why a vault built by smaller worlds needed a human custodian in the first place. For one instant, the mask slipped. Then it returned. Take care, Custodian Soren, he said. Records can damage everyone they touch, including the people who preserve them. Morel held his gaze. Then perhaps powerful people should have handled them better the first time. She left him there and followed the marshal toward the transit wing. The ship was security block standard. Fussed, hard-sided, built to move officials and controlled force without offering comfort. Its corridors were narrow. Its lighting was practical. Its observation ports were few. Morel sat strapped into a passenger frame near the aft command station while two officers reviewed approach geometry with the pilot. Across from her stood Kale Vorin, one hand braced on an overhead rail as the vessel cleared Astervale and dropped toward the Earth-Luna corridor. Below them, Earth turned in blue and white, vast and indifferent. Vorin watched the tactical display rather than her. You had several chances to make this cleaner. Cleaner for whom? For everyone. That usually means for the people already holding power. He looked at her then. You think this is about power. It is about containment. Civilizations have burned for less than what you are implying is in that vault. Morel studied him. Unlike Dal, Vorin did not hide that he believed in hard choices. You really think there might be a doomsday device in there, she said. I think I have seen too many governments call a threat impossible until it reached my desk. And if it is not a weapon, then we verify and move on. No, she said. If it is not a weapon, then this hearing becomes something else entirely, and you know it. Vorin said nothing. After a moment, she added, That bothers other people more than it bothers you. Counselor Dal has his concerns. I mean, your concern is disorder. My concern is preventable collapse. She considered that. Would you still force the opening if you knew the contents could damage the Council more than any enemy fleet? If the alternative is allowing one government to hide them forever, yes. That answer was at least honest. The pilot called back. Approach corridor in 7 minutes. Denial field handshake pending. Morel unfastened one hand and tapped her wrist console. The treaty interface was old, ugly, and impossible to spoof without years of preparation. Vor noticed. What are you doing? Preparing witness routing. Do not activate anything outside escort instructions. I am custodian. If SEAL contact occurs, treaty protocol activates with me, not with you. His jaw tightened. You have a habit of turning procedure into a shield. Only when people use emergency as a crowbar. Minutes later, the vault appeared on forward screens, small against the immensity around it. It orbited in silence above the old line of cislunar traffic, its shape plain and stern, a compact spindle wrapped in armored geometry. No weapons ports, no launch bays, just layered shielding, anchor nodes, and the signatory emblems etched in worn marks along the hull. The pilot announced, security teams locked. Boarding clamp in 90 seconds. Morell placed both hands on her console and began the sequence. Not the distress cascade. Not yet. The distress cascade was the treaty alarm for a broken promise. What she triggered instead was the witness chain. It was simply notice, a warning to every surviving signatory that the vault was about to be touched. One by one, buried node addresses woke across her display. Keishi Reach, Davan Faute, Iliot Remnant, Sevic Freehold, names of governments once too small to guarantee their own memory. Vorin noticed the expanding list. What did you do? Gave the people attached to this vault notice that it is about to be touched. You are broadening a live incident. I'm honoring the terms under which the structure exists. The boarding clamp hit with a deep mechanical thud. 3 hours after leaving Astorvale, Morell crossed the threshold into the archive vestibule. The air inside the vault was dry and still, filtered through systems older than many current governments. Narrow light strips came alive in sequence as the boarding team entered, revealing a chamber built for endurance, not comfort. Beyond the vestibule stood a second door of layered alloy and transparent lattice. Behind that door lay the heart of the archive. Vorin's officers fanned out, scanners moving over walls, floor seams, and dormant control faces. One of them reported, no active weapon systems. Denial field tied to custodial lock only. Vorin said, proceed. Morell did not move. First, the chamber record. A relay drone floated forward and opened a live feed. The Hall of Civic Inquiry appeared across the chamber screen, smaller than before, but full. More delegation lights were active now. The witness chain had done its work. Smaller signatory states that had ignored the first phase were no longer ignoring anything. Morell stepped into frame. For the record, we are inside the Preservation Compact Vault in high orbit near Luna. Access pressure is being applied under Council emergency. Authority. I am present as the designated custodian of Earth under protest. Witness routing has been activated to all surviving signatory channels. Noise rose in the chamber feed. Dal's voice came through with controlled irritation. Custodian Soren, you are instructed to limit public statements to material security facts. This is a material security fact, she said. The archive is not solely between Earth and the Council. Then she turned from the relay and faced the inner door. The second door bore the compact text in 6 scripts. Not poetry, not grand ideals, just terms of burden. Originals. No unilateral custody transfer. No destruction without unanimous signatory consent. Distress notice on breach. Custodian liability acknowledged by Earth. The last line had once made many human politicians uneasy. Morell had always thought that was the point. She placed her palm on the biometric field. The system recognized her after a long pause that felt almost human in its reluctance. A synthetic voice spoke into the vestibule. Custodian recognized. State basis of access. Compelled supervised entry under external force and active witness notification. Record received. Signatory witness channels active. Confirm. A band of light passed over the signatory emblems. One by one, tiny indicators came alive. Vorin stepped closer. Open it. Morell kept her hand in place. You are opening more than a room. That warning is noted. You have not heard it yet. The old voice continued. Compelled supervised entry alters custody conditions. All material removed will be marked disputed. All interpretation rights remain unassigned. That caused visible movement even among Vorin's officers. They had expected files. They had not expected the archive itself to limit who could define them first. Dal's image sharpened in the relay feed. Proceed, he said. The inner door unlocked with a sequence of heavy clicks. Beyond it lay no weapon cradle, no energy chamber, no dormant engine. Instead, there was a circular hall lined with secure testimony columns, each one transparent at the center and armored at the edges. Each held sealed cores and physical record canisters stacked in ordered layers. At the room's center stood a pedestal ringed by old projection anchors. Above it hung a suspended index lattice. Morell stepped toward it and laid her other hand on the central node. Data rose into the air, not diagrams for destruction, not targeting maps. Names, campaign dates, theater codes, command authorizations, evacuation denials, redacted treaties, casualty partitions. The first layer of an archive built from war records, negotiation transcripts, and original testimony deposits. Every officer in the vestibule stopped. Even Vorin looked for one brief second, like a man who had stepped into the wrong argument. The chamber feed became a low wall of overlapping voices. Dow recovered first. Appearances prove nothing. Earth could have arranged a theatrical shell. Morell did not turn from the lattice. Then asked the archive what it is. The old system voice answered before anyone else could. Preservation Compact Repository. Original testimony and command trace record from signatory conflicts designated unreconciled or suppressed. One officer murmured, "Gods." Morell said, "No. Governments." Vorin moved to the central pedestal, eyes scanning the index bloom. "Show me why this required military shielding." Morell selected a file tree with 2 gestures. The projection shifted, revealing authentication chains from multiple governments, some extinct, some absorbed, some still represented in the chamber beyond. Cross-signatures lit in a pattern no single modern state could easily fake. Because witnesses were not trying to preserve history, she said. They were trying to keep power from burying it. Dow snapped in over the relay. And yet Earth buried it. Morell faced the feed. Earth kept it under terms the vulnerable demanded because the powerful would not trust one another, and the small would trust none of you at all. That landed harder now that everyone could see what the vault actually contained. But Dow still had room to move. A repository of raw wartime allegations and uncontextualized command fragments can still act as a weapon if selectively released. Destabilization law remains relevant. There was again. The accusation had changed shape. At the start of the day, he called the vault a weapon. Now that the vault had proved not to be a weapon, he was trying to call the truth inside it the dangerous thing instead. And from there, he wanted the next step. Not just a new label, but control over custody and first interpretation. Morell understood the new fight at once. Vorin seemed to reach the same conclusion from another angle. Seal the central index. No one extracts anything until we establish authenticity. The nearest officer moved toward the control ring. Morell stepped between him and the pedestal, touched that without custodial agreement, and the archive logs active narrative interference. I do not care what it logs. Vorin said, "You will when every signatory sees who tried to impose first description before verification." He hesitated, only for a second. Morell used it. "Archive," she said, "display witness provenance map." The lattice changed again. Instead of document titles, the chamber now saw the chain of origin, deposition nodes, custody marks, neutral timestamp anchors, and cross-verification seals from non-human signatories. The map was dense, ugly, and devastatingly real. The chamber quieted enough for someone to ask, "How much is in there?" The archive answered, "Current repository contains original and derivative records associated with 17 campaigns, 8 coerced territorial transfers, 11 emergency negotiation sets, and 6 unreconciled casualty partitions." Casualty partitions. The phrase struck like cold metal. It needed no long explanation. It meant that somewhere, someone had decided which populations could be lost, so something larger could be preserved. Dow said, more sharply now, "Cut descriptive system output." The chamber has seen enough to justify secure review under council control. At that, Morell understood his fear in full. He was not trying to prove the archive false. He was trying to regain control of pace, order, and first meaning. She chose a file set almost at random, though not truly. She recognized the campaign code at once. Border Sacrifice Campaign. Meridian Sector. Civilian Hold Directive Variants. "Do not open that," Vorin said. which told everyone listening that even he no longer believed he was guarding against a superweapon. Morell opened it. The projection filled with layered command records. First the broad orders, then the local amendments, then a split-screen trace showing evacuation requests from minor Allied worlds delayed while major fleet regrouping corridors were protected. Behind those appeared deposition fragments from relief crews, including one Earth convoy captain who had recorded that certain border settlements were knowingly left exposed because their loss would slow a hostile advance and buy time for treaty negotiations elsewhere. No graphic images. None were needed. The chamber reacted not with outrage at first, but with stunned recognition. Dal moved fast. This proves nothing about council policy as a whole. Wartime, local deviations. Morell cut in. Then look at the authorization relay. She expanded the trace. Higher-level concurrence marks climbed the screen. Not one villain. Not one row commander. A ladder. Someone in the chamber whispered. They signed it upward. Voron's face had gone very still. Seal the live feed to the chamber. That was the first command he gave that sounded like fear. Morell spun toward him. You do that, and every signatory sees that the council cut transmission at the first authenticated chain of liability. I said seal it. The relay drone began to dim. Morell slammed her palm back to the central node. Sci-fi. Confirm external suppression attempt. Trigger compact, review notice. Review notice authorized. The archive replied. Across the chamber feed, signatory channels multiplied again. Dal's voice sharpened. Terminate that protocol. You do not have the standing, Morell said. For a moment, everything in the vault became layered conflict. Officers waiting for orders. The relay feed fracturing under competing permissions. Chamber voices rising in the distance. Signatory windows opening like old doors that had never expected to matter again. Then the archive made the decision larger than any of them. Notice transmitted, it said. Compelled access has entered interpretive dispute. All signatories may petition immediate moral review before material seizure. The phrase had sounded abstract in old treaty language. Here it meant something plain. The fight was no longer about opening the vault. It was now about who had the right to define what the vault meant. Back at Astorvale, the Hall of Civic Inquiry no longer resembled the room that had tried to swallow Earth whole at the start of the day. Delegation lights crowded the chamber in colors that had been dark before, and legal observers who had not bothered to attend the accusation now fought for speaking slots. The emergency had widened beyond security block containment and into legitimacy. Morell remained in the vault, but had full visual and audio into the chamber. That distance helped. It let her watch the system from outside the frame it preferred. Dal was already rebuilding his approach. The responding party has chosen to publicize raw historical material during an active security dispute. Whatever the archive's origin, its unsupervised exposure now threatens intergovernmental stability. Not unsupervised, Morell said through the relay. Witness, a semantic indulgence, a legal one. He ignored that. The Council therefore requests temporary custodial transfer to a neutral stabilization body until authentication, context review, and release controls can be established. There was at last. The true objective stated cleanly. Confiscate. Rename. Slow. Blur. Jonas rose at once from Earth's tier. Earth objects. The proposal would strip a multi-party archive from its designated burden holder at the precise moment high-level liability becomes visible. There is no neutrality in that. A counselor from an outer coalition signaled for recognition. Counselor Dal, would the proposed stabilization body include signatory states? Dal paused a fraction too long. Participation models could be reviewed once materials are secured. Meaning no. Envoy Tarav Noel came back on the line before Dal could redirect. Keishi Reach opposes transfer. We did not ask Earth to hold this archive so larger bodies could take it back once its contents grew inconvenient. Other signatory lights activated in sequence. Morell recognized some names from the witness chain, and some she did not. Their statements were brief. They did not need to be eloquent. They needed to be cumulative. We signed because we feared erasure. We signed because our dead were counted as cost, not citizens. We signed because Earth accepted liability others refused. We signed because the archive was not meant to become yours when the moment grew uncomfortable. Each statement was a weight added to the same side of the scale. Vorin, still in the vault with Morel, watched the chamber feed with the expression of a man, discovering that a tactical operation had crossed into terrain tactics could not solve. You have made this impossible to contain, he said. Morel kept her eyes on the relay. No, the contents did that. He looked at the testimony columns around them. Do you know what happens if all of this goes public at once? Yes. Markets panic. Alliances fracture. Extremists dig up old wounds. Border systems lose faith in central guarantees. Maybe the council survives. Maybe it does not. All of that may be true, she said. It still does not make a lie safer than a fact. Vorin's voice lowered. There are times when timing matters more than purity. Morel finally turned to face him. This is not purity. This is death. He held her gaze. For the first time, there was no institutional distance left between them. Only two people standing inside the remains of choices made by larger systems. What did Earth think would happen eventually? He asked. That this vault would sleep forever. No, she said. We thought power would come for it eventually. That was built into the design. Then why accept it? Because someone had to tell the smaller signatories that at least one major species would take the public hit rather than hand them over when pressure came. Vorin looked away first. The chamber called for reconvened procedural order. It took several minutes. When Dal spoke again, he changed tone completely. No more immediate confiscation language. Too many ears were awake now. Instead, he aimed for moral inversion. Let us strip this of theater, he said. No one here disputes that smaller civilizations suffered. No one here denies that wartime choices left scars. But Earth is not the sole guardian of conscience in this galaxy. By preserving this archive in secret and releasing it only under pressure, Earth has assumed for itself the right to decide when all other governments may be judged by the dead. It was clever because it was partly true. If Morel answered defensively, she would lose. So she did not defend. Earth never claimed that right, she said. The signatories claimed the right not to have their records vanish into the same institutions that failed them. Earth accepted the burden of holding what others feared to touch. A burden that grants influence. A burden that grants blame. The chamber murmured at that. Many had forgotten the second half. Morel continued. Do not imagine this vault elevated Earth. It chained Earth. Every year it remained sealed. We were accused by some of hiding something and criticized by others for not using it. That was the cost of the promise. Dal asked, and what was the benefit? Her answer came without effort. The record survived. That line did more damage to his framing than any accusation could have. He pivoted. Very well. If the promise is your foundation, then let us test it. Is Earth prepared to open the entire archive to the chamber now? The question hit where he meant it to. He assumed she could not say yes. Morel let the chamber feel the weight of the question. Then she said, I am prepared to open the archive under the compact's own moral terms. Dal's expression did not move. Meaning what exactly? Meaning the chamber must choose first what this archive is. He smiled faintly. That sounds dramatic. It is also evasive. No, Morel said. It is the decision you have been avoiding all day. She stepped closer to the relay. From the chamber's perspective, she was no longer only a respondent at a hearing. She was the human standing inside the thing they had spent hours trying to rename. You called this archive a weapon, she said. Then, when that failed, you called it destabilizing material. Then, when witnesses multiplied, you called for neutral seizure. You still have not answered the underlying question. If the original records of what powerful governments did to smaller worlds are dangerous, dangerous to whom? No one answered. So let us simplify it, she said. The chamber may have the archive. Every record, every chain, every deposit, every authenticated trace. I will open it fully if the chamber makes one declaration first. Now even Dal had stopped pretending indifference. What declaration? Morel looked beyond him, to the arcs of delegates, to the smaller signatory lights glowing among the larger blocks, to the room that had expected to judge Earth and now found itself under examination. Either the chamber declares that the truth owed to smaller civilizations has value equal to the comfort of larger powers, in which case the archive opens under full public witness, she said, or the chamber declares openly, on record, that promises made to weaker species have no standing when they become inconvenient to the strong. The silence that followed felt structural, because she had removed every elegant middle path. No technical committee, no temporary seizure wrapped in neutral language, no quiet burial under context review. The chamber could still choose power, but if it did, it would have to say so plainly. Jonas closed his eyes for half a second in something like exhausted admiration. Tariv Noel did not speak. His delegation light remained active and unwavering. Dow recovered enough to attempt one more sidestep. This is a false binary. Then propose a third option, Morell said. Not a delaying structure, not a custody euphemism. A third option that does not either honor the compact or publicly devalue every smaller signatory it was built for. He cannot do it, not because none existed in theory, because none existed that would survive being spoken aloud. The chamber felt that before it consciously understood it. Voron's voice came low from beside Morell in the vault. That was your counterstroke. It was the archives, she said. No, the archive carried the evidence. You turned the hearing into a legitimacy test. Because that is what it always was. In the chamber, the presiding circle called for suspension while blocks conferred. Screens dimmed to advisory mode. Private channels lit like constellations. For the next hour, the conflict left rhetoric and entered arithmetic. Votes, block fears, reputational cost, electoral memory, trade risk, small state outrage, large state damage control. During that hour, Dow requested a private line to the vault. Morell accepted. His face appeared against a dark consultation booth somewhere inside Astervale. He no longer looked soft, only tired and very controlled. You understand, he said, that if the chamber breaks on this, you will not get a purified outcome. The council will survive. The records will be politicized. Your smaller allies will be courted, pressured, divided. Earth will be blamed by half the major blocks for every instability that follows. I know, and you still proceed. Yes. Dal studied her. Do you believe this makes humanity morally superior? No, she said. I believe it makes us responsible for what we promised. His mouth tightened. Responsibility is a beautiful word when spoken by those who do not have to keep order. Morell answered with equal calm. Order that depends on managed forgetting is only delay. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, You think I wanted this to stay buried because I am corrupt. I think you wanted to preserve a structure you believe prevents worse things. Then perhaps you do understand me. I understand you enough to know that you still would have taken the archive. He did not deny it. When the chamber resumed, the decision that emerged was not clean and not noble. It was political, constrained, and real, which was why it mattered. The council would not grant full unilateral seizure. It could not survive that vote now, nor would it permit unrestricted immediate release of every record. Too many major blocks would revolt. Instead, under pressure from signatory testimony and growing public witness, the chamber adopted an interim resolution. First, the archive would remain physically in place under compact authority. Second, no single major power, including Earth, could unilaterally alter, remove, or interpret materials without multi-party witness. Third, an independent review body would be formed immediately, including signatory states and non-aligned legal auditors. Fourth, a first tranche of authenticated records directly related to casualty partition decisions and emergency evacuation denials would be opened under public chamber supervision. It was not justice. It was access. More importantly, it defeated the original goal. The archive had not been taken away. The first explanation would not. Belonged solely to the council. And the chamber had not dared to declare smaller promises worthless. When the vote locked, the chamber exhaled like a body that had discovered it could not remain clenched forever. Morel rested one hand on the central pedestal. She had not realized until then how tired her arm was from holding tension through hours of argument. Voren watched the results settle across the relay screens. You did not win everything. No, you did not even get certainty. No, you let that stand for a moment. And yet you look as if that is enough. It is enough for today. He gave a short nod that might have been respect or resignation. Perhaps both. Then for today, Earth kept its promise. She looked at him. Earth did not keep it alone. No, he said, glancing toward the signatory lights still filling the chamber. It never did. The first public record tranche opened under chamber supervision 40 minutes later. No dramatic collapse followed. Instead, the room had to sit with documents. A transport denial here. A population estimate there. A notation reducing living border worlds to time-buying variables. A command concurrence chain showing how suffering traveled upward without stopping the machinery that approved it. Then, threaded through that machinery, came testimony from relief crews, treaty observers, and local civilian witnesses who had spent years being told their memory was incomplete, emotional, or strategically naive. The devastating part was not one monstrous revelation. It was the pattern. The records showed what smaller civilizations had long suspected. Not that the great powers were uniquely evil, but that they had often found it acceptable to let those with the least leverage bear the weight first. When the first tranche closed, the chamber no longer sounded outraged. It sounded altered. Some representatives demanded broader release. Others pleaded caution. Several major blocs immediately began crafting statements about historical complexity, inherited responsibility, and institutional renewal. The usual language arrived because it always arrived, but it no longer arrived in a vacuum. Dow made one final attempt to steer the narrative. The Council must not allow legitimate grief to become fragmentation. We cannot correct historic failures by tearing apart the cooperative architecture that prevents new ones. It was a better speech than Morel expected, maybe even a sincere one. But the room had shifted too far for him to own the center. Terra of Null requested recognition and received it. Keishi Reach does not seek fragmentation, he said. Keishi Reach seeks adulthood. If the larger powers wish to lead, let them first prove they can survive an honest record. That line stayed in the chamber longer than many speeches did. Afterward, when the procedural fight finally gave way to adjournment, Aster Vale entered the strange quiet that follows major institutional damage. Corridors filled with aides speaking too softly. Delegates hurried with careful faces. News channels split into legal analysis, emergency commentary, and long overdue interviews with signatory representatives who had not been asked to speak in years. Morel remained at the vault through debrief and transfer scheduling. By the time she returned to the station, artificial evening had deepened across the public levels. The observation gallery outside the diplomatic wing was almost empty. Beyond its long, curved glass, Earth turned below in layered blue, calm in the way planets always looked from a distance. She stood there alone for a while, not triumphant, not relieved, just still. Her wrist console chimed once. Incoming local contact. Terra of Null, she said when she accepted. The Keishi envoy joined her in person minutes later, moving with the deliberate quiet of someone who believed moments should not be crowded. He stopped beside her at the glass, hands folded behind his back. For a station built around argument, he said, this place becomes very quiet after truth. Morel let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Only until the new arguments begin. They already have. They watched Earth for a moment. Terav said, many in the smaller delegations are sending thanks. Many are also frightened. They should be, Morel said. This changes the incentives around them. Yes, some major blocs will pressure them to soften. Others will offer favors in exchange for loyalty. Some will try to convince them this was all a human move for influence. They know that. She turned slightly. Do they believe it? Terav considered before answering. Some will. Fear is practical, but many will remember a simpler thing. When the chamber tried to rename the archive, Earth did not surrender the naming. Morel looked back at the planet below. The night side had rotated into view, cities pricking the darkness with human light. "We did not do it because we are better," she said. "I know. We did it because we said we would." Tariffs. Voice softened. "That is better than most systems manage." They stood in silence again. At length he said, "There is something else you should know. Several signatory groups are already proposing a permanent revision to Council Compact law. They want promises made to minor species during wartime to carry independent review rights that cannot be suspended by central blocks." Morell turned toward him fully. "That would take years. Yes. It may fail. Yes. But they are trying. They are." That, more than the chamber vote, felt like the real aftershock. Not outrage. Not scandal. A structural imagination widening by 1 degree because someone had forced a question into the open and left it there. Tarav inclined his head toward the glass. "Many generations from now, they may not remember the exact names of the counselors who argued today. They may not remember which blocks stalled and which adapted. But I think they will remember that when the larger order called the truth a weapon, Earth refused to agree." Morell absorbed that without answering at once. Then she said, "Memory is selective, only when left unattended." He took his leave after that. Jonas reached her in the gallery not long after Tarav left. He looked worse than he had that morning, which in his case meant his tie was looser and his anger had cooled into precision. "You disappeared," he said. "I found a window." A wise tactical decision. Half the station wants to ask you whether humanity just saved the council from itself or set fire to it. Morell gave him the smallest tired smile. "And your answer?" "My answer depends on who is asking." He came to stand beside her at the glass. For a while they said nothing. At last Jonas said, "Earth mission has 3 immediate problems. Major bloc delegates are already floating the argument that humanity preserved the archive to build future bargaining power. 2 commercial networks are repeating Dow's line about destabilizing release. And several smaller delegations want closed consultations before dawn because they believe retaliation will begin in quieter forms before public reform ever reaches a committee." "All of that sounds correct," Morell said. "It does." He handed her a summary band. She did not read it right away. "What is Earth saying?" she asked. "Publicly, very little. The Foreign Secretariat released a measured statement about shared accountability, durable institutions, and the right of signatories to protected testimony." He paused. "Privately, a few people are furious that today's outcome may reopen old human decisions too." Morell nodded. "It should." Jonas glanced sideways at her. "You realize that is not how senior governments usually frame self-exposure. Then senior governments can broaden their habits." He let out one dry breath that might have been a laugh. "You really are impossible after a hearing." "Only after?" He looked down at the station lights far below the gallery floor. "For what it is worth, you gave the Secretariat exactly the position it needed. We were never going to leave here loved, but we may leave credible." That mattered more than approval. Both of them knew it. Morell finally opened the summary band. Messages continued arriving in silent stacks. Formal thanks. Formal condemnations. Requests for interviews. Requests for access. Warnings from analysts. Private notes from minor envoys. Then one brief message from Jonas appeared on a separate line. "You made them choose in daylight." She read it twice and closed the screen. Below, Earth completed another fraction of its turn, carrying oceans, storms, cities, graves, treaties, lies, promises, and the people stubborn enough to try making promises matter. The council had not fallen. The archive had not solved history. The powerful had not become gentle. Tomorrow would bring containment efforts, reframing attempts, and polite campaigns to reduce what the day had opened. Morell knew all of that. But the old order had been forced to stop pretending that smaller civilizations were abstract costs inside someone else's balance sheet. It had been made to hesitate. Sometimes that was where change began. Not with victory songs. With hesitation in the machinery. Morell Soren, senior treaty archivist on paper and custodian of a harder burden in truth, rested her palm lightly against the glass. Far below, humanity's world moved on in silence. Not the largest power in the galaxy. Not the cleanest. not the least guilty, just the one that had stood in a chamber full of greater weight and refused to say that a promise to the weak could be discarded for the comfort of the strong. And for one long night over Astorvale, that was enough to make the entire system pause. If this story stayed with you, then maybe it touched something real in all of us. Not power, not fear, but the quiet weight of a promise that should never have been broken. In a galaxy built on pressure, silence, and compromise, Earth chose to remember. And sometimes, that is the bravest thing anyone can do. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, share it with someone who loves thoughtful science fiction, and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly means a lot, and it helps me keep creating more stories that bring reflection, wonder, and a little peace after a long day. Thank you for being here. And until the next story, take care.